Well, Susan and I are glad to be back with you this morning, and I'm glad to see all of you, and I want to thank all of you for the many acts of kindness and expressions of kindness in regard to our dad's passing. And I know Steve and Michelle are grateful, and Susan and I are grateful, and so you've been very, very kind, and we're thankful for all that. We are returning this morning to somewhat of our study in the book of Romans. At least we know that the book of Romans is a book of grace and faith, and we've been trying to deal with this subject of faith a bit. And 2 weeks ago, you likely won't remember exactly, but we talked about this tension that exists in all of our lives between fear and faith. And I suspect over the last 2 weeks, you've experienced, you've felt something about this tension. Because is it not true that you and I are a fear-prone people? We're so easily frightened. We are frightened about our health. We are frightened easily when we hear about record high inflation and interest rates going up because of inflation. And we are frightened when we hear about Russia and Ukraine and what that might mean to all of us. And if you watch very much news, it seems that the news is designed to promote fear. And likely you have grown very weary of watching the news and hearing reports about COVID-19, and different variants. And you're probably tired of hearing about the number of people in the hospital and the number of people who have died and the need to get 1 shot and 2 shots and 3 shots and the mask. And it all seems to be about promoting fear and even panic in our lives. There is a constant tension for all of us between this idea of fear and faith. And I think God understands that. God understands that you and I are so easily frightened, and God wants us to conquer our fears by recognizing them quickly and returning to the fact that He is in control and that He is all-powerful and that He loves us and that He is trustworthy. And maybe remember what we've said, that long before God looks at anything that we do, He looks at our heart. And He wants to see this heart of confidence and trust. It's really that He looks at our heart and everything first. If I make this statement, will you recognize it? In spirit and in truth. Of course you recognize that statement, don't you? It is a common statement in our prayers. You may remember that statement comes from a conversation between Jesus and a woman. And the woman is asking Jesus about worship. And these questions about worship have always apparently been around. And she's going to say to Jesus, well, where do we worship? Your people say over there on a city, and our people say over here on a mountain, and which is right? And it's like Jesus says, neither. It doesn't make any difference. Because now the time is coming when those who worship God must worship Him in spirit and in truth. But the word spirit there is not capitalized. When the translators capitalize the word spirit, they're always trying to denote for us that it's talking about God's Spirit. This word is not capitalized. It's talking about my spirit and your spirit, my heart and your heart. And those who worship God start that worship in the heart and in truth. And it may be a big debate about the word truth there, but I think in context, Jesus is talking about Himself. I'm the way, I'm the truth. And everybody that worships me now will worship starting in the heart and through me. That's the way you get to the Father. But it's in everything that God wants to look inside our hearts first and to see the motivation and see what's happening. And so often, fear crowds out what God wants to see. So I'm going to take you to an old story. It's one that everybody in this audience will know backwards and forwards, and we're trying to use this new technology even a little better, but this morning it's a lot of verses. And I'm not sure I'm going to read all those verses, but you're going to be able to see them as we put them on the screen. Yeah, I'll read some, I'll tell some. But I take you back again to the life of Abraham. I take you back to the story of God's promise to Abraham. I will give your descendants a special land, a land of major fertility. But that promise takes a while in coming. There's always, it seems, in life, derailments. In fact, they've been in Egypt for a bit over 400 years. And that's a long time. And during that 400 years, they keep telling the story from generation to generation that God is going to give us a land that he promised to our father Abraham. And finally, after all that long period of time, Moses arrives. And there are these giant works of God placed upon Egypt. And they're uncomfortable, miserable works of God for the Egyptian people. And finally, the people get to leave Egypt. And it's not a very far journey to the Jordan River. Oh, they have an obstacle again. There are always obstacles in life. They have a Red Sea obstacle. But they get through that. And they're right there at the Jordan River. They can see across to that land that had been promised to them all the way back to the days of Abraham. Now can you begin to imagine the excitement? Look at it from God's perspective. You think God's excited about giving these people that gift? Every parent here has been through this experience. Have you ever purchased for your child a gift that you're so excited about, you can hardly wait to give it to them? It was maybe on Christmas. It was maybe on a birthday. It was maybe at another totally unrelated type event. And you bought this gift and you could just hardly wait to give it to them. All of us have had that experience. Don't you think that's how God is? This is the land. This is the land I picked out for you all those years earlier. And God can hardly wait for them to walk across that Jordan River and get into that land. And can you imagine the story from their perspective? Because they've been waiting for all their lives. And they can hardly wait to get there. And it's like the kid on Christmas morning who sees that big box and they kind of have an idea what it might be and they can hardly wait to tear into it and see what the gift is. And it's right across the river. But God wants to know about their hearts. He wants to know about their confidence, their faith, their trust. And so God names 12 men to go across into the land. And in Numbers chapter 13, we find the story, and you begin in verse 17 of that story. And he said, I want you to go into this land, up through the Negev and into the hill country, and I want you to see what the land is like, and whether the people there are strong, weak, few, many. And I want you to look at the land. And is the land good to live in, or is it bad to live in? And are the cities walled? And I want you to look at the fertility of the land. I want you to see if the land is as good as you thought it would be. Now, why is God doing that? He already knows what the land's like. He knows what the people are like. But these people who are about to cross over don't know. It's only been a picture in their mind. It's only been a story passed down through the ages. And so 12 spies go over, and they investigate the land. They're gone for a total of 40 days. For 40 days, they're searching out this land. And they return. And as they return, they begin to talk about the land that does flow with milk and honey. It's wonderful. And they've been instructed by God to bring back some of the produce. And it says they have a cluster of grapes. Now, try to put this in your mind. A cluster of grapes so large that they tie it to a pole and stretch it pole between the shoulders of two people. Can you imagine anything like that? Suze frequently brings home grapes in the season to our house in clusters. They fit easily in a little tiny bowl. Can you imagine what these people are seeing? And the pomegranates? This is the best land you can ever imagine. What a place to live. But, and there's always in life that word. There's always in life that word. Do you understand that? Things are wonderful and things are great and the promise is big and we're excited about it. But the people are well fortified and the people are strong. And you know what? We even saw some of the descendants of Anak. They're the giants. They're the giants. And you can feel it start happening. You can feel it start happening in the lives of all those people. Fear. They become afraid. And they begin to think about going over into that land and how big those people are and how strong those people are. And Caleb will speak up. He's one of the 12. And he'll say, oh, no, be quiet. This is going to work out. God's on our side. We can take this. But 10 of those people who crossed over keep saying, you just don't understand. The people are so huge. It's so dangerous. If we go over there, we'll be killed. And when we start talking like that, one to another, the fear gets worse, doesn't it? Remember our old principle? I've told it to you over and over again. What you focus on, you remember? Grows. What you focus on grows. What you talk about gets worse. If it's bad, it gets worse. And they keep talking about it, and they work themselves up into such a panic. They are paralyzed in their fear. And do you know those people are so afraid and so angry about the mess they're now in, the mess they think they're in at least, that they decide that they're going to kill Moses and his brother Aaron? They decide they're going to stone them to death. After all, they're the leader. They got us here. And God at this point has had all he wants of these people who allow fear to dominate their lives. And he says, Moses, you stand back. I'm going to kill every one of these people. I'm going to kill every one of them. Wow. Wow. You think God's serious? But Moses is this gentle giant leader. And the world today still hasn't figured out how much power there is in gentle leadership. And he says things like, God, if you kill these people now, all the people in Canaan land are going to say you weren't big enough, so to speak, to get them over there. And they're going to talk badly about you. And they're going to criticize you. Please don't do it. You know what else God had said to Moses? I'll kill them all and I'll raise up out of you a new people. I'm going to take your people now and I'll make them into the nation that inherits this land. That would have taken many, many, many more years. But Moses still says, no, God, please don't do this. And so God says, all right, I won't do it. But I'll tell you what's going to happen. I'm going to make these people so that they never enter the land. That's the phrase. They'll never enter the land. And here's how I'm going to work it. They were over there for 40 days. They're going to wander in the wilderness for 40 years. Can you imagine hearing that? Can you imagine what that would be like? 40 years stumbling around in the desert. I can't imagine. And it was so close. It was right there, right across over there. There was a land with milk and honey. Right over there, there were big cities that were going to be given to us. And right over there was plenty of water. And right over there was the good life. It's everything that God had planned. Now for the next 40 years, we're going to walk around in the desert until all of us over the age of 20 are dead. Except for Caleb, except for Joshua, because they were the ones that lived by faith and would not let fear conquer their lives. And that story takes place just like that. They literally look at the Jordan River and turn around and start another direction. All because they let fear conquer their faith. How are you and I supposed to live? How are you and I supposed to do it? Because you and I are prone to fear. And you and I have things happening in life all the time that make us afraid. And then we talk to each other about our fears and about our speculations. And we listen to that news. And it gets worse. And we think everything's going to fall apart. And where are we going to end up in this life? And how are we supposed to do it? Because fear is natural. And I think what God is saying is this. It's okay to be afraid. It's just not okay to stay afraid. It's okay to be afraid. It's not okay to stay afraid. For I want you to pause in your fear and remember who I am. And that with me, all things are possible. And I am on your side. And I will take care of you. And I want you to put your confidence and your trust in that. And if you put your confidence and trust in that, peace will come in the midst of your fear. And your outlook will change. And joy will work its way into your heart instead of the panic. And Paul is so convinced of that in the book of Romans that I take you back again to this statement in chapter 8, verse 32. If God has already given you his Son, will he not also take care of you in all the other things that you need in this life? Isn't that amazing? Isn't that just an amazing, profound thought? That if God has loved me so, that he's given to us his Son, don't you think he'll take care of the rest of everything? You see, that's what he wanted the people to think like at the Jordan River. Caleb tried to say it. Joshua apparently tried to say it. Don't you remember Egypt? Don't you remember the grasshoppers? Don't you remember the lice? Don't you remember the blood? Don't you remember the frogs? Don't you remember the death of the firstborn? Don't you remember walking across that Red Sea on dry land? Don't you remember? And he wanted those people to say, yeah, I do remember that. And yes, God will take care of me. And with that, he wanted them to walk across that river. He wanted them to walk across that river with smiles on their face and say, bring on the giants. Bring on the big cities. Bring on the swords and watch God work. Don't you want to live like that? He's given you his Son. He'll take care of you the rest of the way. One more time, I want to take you back to a verse that we used last week, Revelation chapter 21 and verse 8. Talking about all those people be thrown into that lake which burns with fire and brimstone, the second death. The very first person. The International Version says the cowardly. Other translations say the fearful. I find myself wondering more and more if he's not talking about those people who let fear conquer their faith and they remain paralyzed. God intends for us to be kingdom people, to live with abundance, abundance in attitude, abundance in optimism, excitement, anticipation of all the great things that God wants to do in our lives. And he wants us to live with expectation of the promised land for us, which is better than Canaan land. It's heaven land. That's how he wants us to live. And the only way we can live like that is by faith, putting our confidence and our trust in him and acting like it and obeying like it.